Coming to you from a cozy little condo high atop Old 4th Ward, Atlanta. Welcome to The Ron Show on America One Radio. Here's your host, Ron Roberts.
Happy Tuesday. Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, weekdays 9 to 10 a.m., replay 5 to 6 p.m., or at AmericaOneRadio.com. You can do that same time slots there. Whether you listen via podcast or on demand at ProgressiveVoices.com, I thank you for listening. Tomorrow, Libertarian presidential nominee Chase Oliver will be on the show. In fact, I'll be recording that conversation just about as soon as I get done with today's show, so that we'll have that ready for you tomorrow. Looking very much forward to that. Speaking of the presidential race, there's new polling out, both the New York Times with national swing state polling and the Atlanta Journal-Constitution with a new poll out as well. And we'll get to that second half of the show. First thing I want to get to is just sort of a rejoining of yesterday's conversation. We were joined by Melita Easters, Executive Director of the Georgia Win List. That is the organization here in the state of Georgia that backs and endorses women candidates who are pro-choice. We were commemorating the second anniversary of the Dobbs decision, which overturned Roe v. Wade and its 5+ decades of precedence, despite testimony from 3 of Donald Trump's Supreme Court nominees who would become justices that precedence mattered. It apparently did not. Anyway, news broke yesterday. I mean, just as soon as we got done with the show, I'd gotten off the call with Melita, finished up the segments, put them on the air, wrapped up the show notes, and then this news dropped from the Journal of the American Medical Association. I'm reading this from the USA Today article written by Eduardo Cuevas from the state of Texas. Texas lawmakers touted their heartbeat law as an effort to save lives, but the state's near-total ban on abortion appears to have triggered an increase in infant deaths, according to a new study published Monday. That study by the Journal of the American Medical Association. The findings in the JMA Pediatrics show that infant deaths rose after Texas Senate Bill 8, which banned all abortions after about 6 weeks from conception. SB 8 became Texas law in September 2021, and U.S. Supreme Court overturned the constitutional right to abortion just over 9 months later on June 24, 2022, as we noted yesterday. The high court ruling in the Dobbs case prompted more than a dozen states to issue near-total bans on abortion. Observers speculate that evidence will also show increases in infant deaths in those states, akin to what Texas has seen, the study shows. It just points to some of the devastating consequences of abortion bans that maybe people weren't thinking about when they passed these laws, said Allison Jamil, an assistant professor at Johns Hopkins University's Bloomberg School of Public Health. What, did they put that on a sign? That is a long sign. Who authored the study. She called the deaths following the Texas heartbeat law its, quote, spillover effects on moms and babies. And then this story filed last night by Laura Jarrett on NBC News.
It was almost 2 years ago today that the Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade, clearing the way for states to impose new restrictions on abortion, including Texas, where Laura Jarrett spoke with 5 women who have faced a devastating impact.
Pre-Dobbs, we were already in a pretty bad place in Texas.
The day Lauren Miller learned she was pregnant, she started a journal.
I didn't know it was twins yet.
But at 12 weeks, she learned that one of the twins she was carrying had trisomy 18, a rare chromosomal condition making survival highly unlikely.
You never think that your pregnancy journal is just going to turn into a horror novel.
Because her fetus still had a heartbeat, she couldn't get an abortion under the law in Texas, and she's not alone.
How many of you were told you could not receive an abortion because the baby still had a heartbeat?
All of them.
All of you.
Texas, like more than a dozen other states, moved swiftly to cut off abortion access after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade 2 years ago today in the Dobbs decision. The High Court saying then that it was returning the issue of abortion to the people's elected representatives. But what's happened in states since Dobbs? Now a fierce fight heading into November.
Getting it back to the states puts the question where it belongs with the vote of the people.
Former President Trump taking full credit for getting Roe overturned, but more recently also saying he believes in exceptions in cases of rape, incest, and to save a mother's life.
You have to go with your heart, but you have to also remember you have to get elected.
Rallies across the country today as the Biden campaign tries to draw a direct line from Mr. Trump to Dobbs.
Decades of progress shattered just because the last guy got 4 years in the White House.
Highlighting women denied abortions, releasing ads focused on their stories, and making it a central focus of the re-election campaign. The vice president addressing a crowd today.
In the case of the stealing of reproductive freedom from the women of America, Donald Trump is guilty.
Let's go back to the USA Today article, too. I want to read some more about the Texas mortality rate climbing because of their draconian abortion ban. In the wake of the law's passage in Texas, more babies died before their first birthday, likely due to birth defects or genetic problems that wouldn't have allowed them to live, the study found. These pregnancies would typically have been terminated by abortions, according to researchers. The Texas heartbeat law does not provide exceptions for pregnancies involving such conditions. Mothers are legally obligated to carry these babies to birth under state law. In the peer-reviewed Journal of the American Medical Association, Jamel and researchers from Johns Hopkins and Michigan State University wrote that the Texas law was linked to, quote, unexpected increases in infant and neonatal deaths between 2021 and 2022. I argue unexpected. Why would you say unexpected? This is completely expected. Prior research drew a correlation between the uptick in infant deaths and anti-abortion laws taking effect. However, no studies until now have attributed the fatalities directly to the laws prohibiting the termination of these pregnancies. Abortion care is an essential component of comprehensive health care, and when it is restricted, the human impacts are devastating. That from Wendy Davis, a senior advisor for Planned Parenthood, Texas Votes, said in a statement. Davis, who filibustered for abortion rights when she was a Democratic state senator, also a gubernatorial candidate back in the day, noted that the study only covered 2022, not the results in 2023 and 2024 in the wake of a more restrictive abortion ban that came with the Dobbs decision. This, quote, likely means the situation on the ground today is even more dire, according to Wendy Davis. Back to NBC.
Recent data over the last 2 years showing more women forced to travel for care since Dobbs. Women like Jessica Bernardo, one of a group of women who filed a lawsuit against the state last year with the help of the Center for Reproductive Rights, alleging they were denied abortions in Texas. 5 of them sat down exclusively with Nightly News.
I didn't want to wait for having a seizure or heart or renal failure. There's no coming out back from that. It was just infuriating.
We're not here sounding an alarm about hypothetical scenarios. We're sounding the alarm about what is already happening and what has happened to us.
But not everyone has been able to travel. Samantha Casiano learned at her 20-week scan that her baby had anencephaly and would not survive, but could not afford to leave Texas for an abortion.
It was hard and traumatizing.
Her baby living only 4 hours after birth.
Knowing that your child is going to die and planning your child's funeral before your child's even here is insane.
It's not only insane, it is cruel. It is repugnant. It is indignant for politicians to know these things are possible and not give a rat's ass. So don't suppose it would surprise you that the barbed wire in the Rio Grande Texas Governor Greg Abbott acknowledged the study's findings. From the USA Today again, Texas Governor Greg Abbott's office did not dispute the state's findings, but defended the Republican-controlled state's anti-abortion record. This effort included the 2021 heartbeat law, quote, to save the innocent unborn, and now thousands of children have been given a chance at life. That from Andrew Maharlis, a spokesperson for Abbott, in a statement given to the USA Today. He said the governor has taken, quote, significant action to protect the sanctity of life, even if it's just 4 hours before a grieving mother has to, again, plan for the funeral of that infant. And offered resources to expectant mothers, quote, so they can choose life for their child, but not a procedure to terminate a pregnancy doomed to minutes, hours, days, weeks, maybe months of struggle. And dare I point out, as I mentioned with Melita Easters yesterday, the expense that comes with that sort of health care that could have been prevented, that sometimes sends families into bankruptcy. It's mind-boggling. That it's just mind-boggling. The indignance, the dismissiveness, the lack of care that these zealots have for women and these children who are born for minutes, hours, days, weeks maybe of struggling. What sanctity of life is that at all, whatsoever? I mean, we're not dealing with sane people here. Listen to this insanity. Amy O'Donnell, a spokesperson for the Texas Alliance for Life, said the study's findings didn't come as a surprise. She said babies born with disabilities and even fatal anomalies. She said babies born with disabilities and even fatal anomalies deserve a chance at life, even if that means a newborn dies after birth from a condition doctors anticipated would be lethal. The death of a child is not easy, she acknowledged. She noted that her nonprofit offers resources for families grieving from such losses. Oh, resources for grieving families who wanted to avoid the grief altogether. How compassionate. Allison Jamil from Johns Hopkins said babies that died shortly after being born with birth defects, quote, probably caused a lot of unnecessary trauma to families. You think?
Amanda Zarowski had the resources to travel, but says she became too sick too fast to leave Texas in time.
I didn't even have that option because my doctors told me you better not be more than 15 minutes away from a hospital. I have to use a surrogate now because of what happened to me. The damage to my reproductive organs is permanent.
There you hear a woman who a lot of anti-abortion advocates would call a baby killer for wanting to terminate a pregnancy she knew was doomed to failure because her doctors told her so, who would love to have children again on her own and now can't because of these draconian laws in states like Texas. These anti-choice nuts who will stand outside these clinics on sidewalks and yell at them and spew vitriol, that's the kind of woman that walks into those clinics that listens to that venom. It's disgusting.
How many of you are worried that someone is going to die from these laws?
If they haven't already.
Yeah. And Laura, any day now, the Supreme Court is expected to rule on another major abortion case.
Yes, Lester, that's right. It's a dispute about whether hospitals that receive federal funding must perform abortions in medical emergencies, even in states where abortion is banned right now. And a decision in that case is expected by the end of this week or early next, Lester.
All right, Laura Jarrett, thank you.
So let's do a little house cleaning. That's a study that was done in Texas by the Journal of the American Medical Association. Researchers examined death records beginning after the heartbeat law went into effect. The study created a synthetic Texas that simulated outcomes that would have happened had the law not been in effect and compared the numbers to national trends during that period. In 2021, 1,985 Texas infants died before their first birthday. The next year, with SB 8 in effect, the fatalities jumped to 2,240, a 12.9% increase that came as the U.S. experienced an overall increase of less than 2%. Deaths attributable to congenital anomalies or birth defects spiked nearly 23% in Texas compared to a 3% decrease nationally. It suggests that really this policy was responsible for this increase in infant deaths in Texas, Jamil said. The study is significant because of Texas' role as a conservative state with urban and rural areas that may reflect what happens in the rest of the U.S., according to Dr. Tracy Wilkinson, an associate professor of pediatrics and obstetrics and gynecology at the Indiana University School of Medicine. Texas has been living under restrictions longer than any other states that enacted abortion bans after the Dobbs ruling. She states, when people ask me why this is happening, it's really simple. When you take away people's ability to make decisions about if and when they have pregnancies, you're going to see outcomes like increasing infant and maternal mortality. One more note from that USA Today article covering this JMA study. The study did not examine the effects of infant deaths on the health of mothers who were legally required to deliver dead babies to term, nor did it look at the mental health effects of carrying infants and delivering them, only to see them die. The study also raises but does not tackle questions about the financial cost to families of carrying and delivering terminally ill newborns. Yes, how many women, like the one cited in the NBC News piece, now can't bear children? have to go to a surrogate, or how many women may have actually died, how many may have attempted or committed suicide. The article actually also speaks to Molly Duane, a senior staff attorney at the abortion rights advocacy nonprofit Center for Reproductive Rights, which I believe we heard in the NBC News piece cited as well. Molly Duane questioned the claim by anti-abortion activists that Texas is a, quote, pro-life state, given the study's findings. Women are hurting, families are hurting, babies are dying, and no one in the state is taking responsibility for any of the real human suffering. Last couple of lines here in this article. In late 2023, the U.S. Centers for Disease Control and Prevention report found increases in infant deaths for the first time in more than 20 years. Wonder why. The states identified in the report with increased fatalities were states that restricted abortion access. However, experts cautioned at the time that they could not say what had caused the spikes in fatalities. The Texas study went one step further, finding one state where abortion restrictions resulted in more deaths. USA Today article and NBC News piece in today's show notes at ronshowatl.com. So in a few minutes, second half of the show, we'll dive into some new poll numbers, both from the New York Times, giving us the national presidential average, swing state polling as well. And then the Atlanta Journal-Constitution and the University of Georgia did a poll themselves. And there's some concerns about the 1829 numbers. And I don't mean like just what they're saying, but also maybe sampling problems. They don't make sense. And yet at the same time, I think there's also been a little bit of concern based on grassroots activism within the state of Georgia, unrelated wholly to the presidential race. I'm talking Israel, Gaza, the Atlanta Public Safety Training Facility, a.k.a. Cop City. But one more point to make about the abortion story and the study from the state of Texas that I think bears just a few more minutes of our time with. Ashley Judd last night on CNN.
We have a debate coming on Thursday. It's a big debate. It'll be right here on CNN. How do you think this is going to play in that debate? How big of a showcase do you think it will be or should be, especially for President Biden going into that contest with Donald Trump?
Look, it's really clear that the only candidates running for president who support girls and women's right to plan and space the births of their children and to terminate a pregnancy if that's what they need to do, it's the Biden-Harris ticket. You know, President Trump has said that watching us die from lack of access to abortion care because he vowed to, appoint Supreme Court justices who would overturn a constitutional right to abortion has been, quote, a beautiful thing to watch. That's really clear. And what I want to emphasize is that abortion care is really about stories and it's about us. And even though I'm absolutely voting for Biden-Harris, I am campaigning for them. They are the path forward for American democracy. 87% of media articles that were reviewed never quote a doctor when talking about abortion. 92% don't even include a woman who's had an abortion.
Wow.
This needs to be taken out of the realm of politics and put where it belongs, which is in the lives of women.
And by the way, she was on with Abby Phillips. I should have cited Abby. Sorry about that. And by the way, to me, this Texas study is some of the first concrete evidence that, well, we told you so. Or actually, I should say the experts and the doctors and the women told you so. Yesterday with Melita Easters from the Georgia Win List, I actually questioned how important an issue abortion is 2 years after Dobbs with the mifepristone ruling last week. Does that sort of stunt the blow? But then this Texas study comes out. And I'm sorry, if I'm Biden-Harris, I am citing this study as often as possible and saying, my opponent, Donald Trump, says that his Supreme Court is a beautiful thing and that overturning Roe v. Wade, a beautiful thing. And we're seeing a 12.9% spike in infant deaths. And we don't even know yet the impact it's having on women's health. But if your wife, if your daughter plans to have children, are you okay with that? Are you okay with those risks now? In, 19 of the states that have these draconian laws? 1 in 3 women who live in states that limit her access to reproductive care, and to hell with her health, mental health, physical health, her viability after such a pregnancy. I mean, this is what happens when you let people govern based on feelings, gut instinct, and demonize those of us who believe in a woman's right to choose. We're not baby killers, and we're not championing the killing of babies. Of course not. Anyone with any rational mind would know that. Many on the right, they know that. And in some cases on the right, for politicians, it was just a means to keep getting voters to turn up, whether or not they were ever able to overturn Roe v. Wade. I mean, the Georgia law is a great example of that. Many conservative politicians using abortion to keep getting reelected, and then drafting a law that they knew wasn't going to become the law of the land in the state because Roe v. Wade was there to protect them from themselves. And then the Dobbs decision came and exposed them, which is why there were legal questions about the validity of that law in the first place. This is The Ron Show on the America One Radio app, AmericaOneRadio.com, wherever you podcast.
Want to be on the show? Have a cause or campaign you'd like to speak up for? Email Ron at ronshowatl.com or call 404-919-2725. The Ron Show on America One Radio.
Tomorrow, Libertarian presidential nominee, the candidate for U.S. President, Chase Oliver, an Atlanta resident, will be on the show. In fact, we're taping that conversation later this morning to air here on The Ron Show. So that'll be the second presidential candidate that I've had on my show. Marianne Williamson joined the show. Gosh, I know it's been, since October maybe? It's been a minute. Anyway, new Atlanta Journal-Constitution polling is out. Let's see where Chase Oliver is. The School of Public and International Affairs Survey Research Center at the University of Georgia, teaming up with the Atlanta Journal-Constitution to give us this general election survey sampling 1,000 voters. And I believe that they cited them as likely to vote. Definitely or probably going to vote in the 2024 election, as they cited that, according to the Department of Political Science, releasing that survey. 1,000 voters. They do not break down numbers based on certain demographics. They did say interviews were conducted in English, dual-frame statewide random sample consisting of approximately 90% cell phone numbers and 10% landline numbers, which I think is still a little weighted older if you ask me. Further into their calculations, they did say this: President Biden v. Trump. The difference between first-place candidate Trump's estimated vote share and Biden's estimated vote share at 5.1% is not statistically significant. In plain English, this race is a statistical tie, they say. So let's go through the polling, and we'll just go question by question and then break it down by demographic if we need to. If the election for president were held today and the candidates were blank, for whom would you vote? They have Joe Biden, Donald Trump, Chase Oliver, RFK, other, not voting, undecided. 7.9%, by the way, undecided. That's the top line. 7.9% undecided. But these are people who are likely to vote. Joe Biden with 37.6%, Donald Trump 42.7%. Tomorrow's guest, Chase Oliver, 1%. In his home state, where he got 82,000 votes in the U.S. Senate race with Raphael Warnock, Reverend Senator Raphael Warnock, and Herschel Walker. RFK Jr., 8.5%. When you take his 8.5% and that undecided 7.9%, that is a huge chunk of undecideds. Which way those 8.5% for Kennedy would break in a one-on-one, no idea. Let's see. When you look at this amongst males, the gap widens with Donald Trump getting nearly 50%, 49.9%. Female, and I think that'll grow. Biden leads 40.5 to 37.1. Amongst white voters, Donald Trump trounces the field with 60.5% of the vote. Amongst African-American voters, Joe Biden trounces the field with 68.8% of the vote, although he did better than that in 2020. Amongst 18 to 29-year-olds, this is, as Patricia Murphy at the Atlanta Journal-Constitution went on the Twitter X platform to say, a red flag. 18 to 29-year-old voters. Donald Trump gets 37.2%. RFK Jr., 29.7%. What the hell, kids? I'm sorry. And Joseph Robinette Biden, 12.2%. That's amongst 18 to 29-year-old voters. And I'm not going to sit here and say that I don't believe that, but I think there's a sampling problem. I do. I just when you look back at the 2020 results, not just in the state of Georgia, this is overall. This is just looking overall nationally, just to give you an idea where we are now versus then. In 2020, Joe Biden received 60% of the 18 to 29-year-old vote, 60% to Donald Trump's 36%. And in the Georgia polling, we're seeing where Joe Biden would have gotten 60% nationally, he's getting 12.2% of 18 to 29-year-old voters now. I don't think it's that bad. I really don't. Although it's a little concerning. Again, I think this is a sampling problem. A little concerning that RFK Jr. has a better chance of winning the 18 to 29-year-old vote than Joe Biden. Closer statistically to Donald Trump. The numbers actually get a little bit closer when you go up in age. 30 to 44-year-olds, it's 42.7 to 36.8 in favor of Donald Trump. 45 to 64, the 45 to 64 voter swings to Joe Biden, 46.9% to 39%. And actually, that's the only age demographic where Joe Biden shows a lead, because when you go 65 and up, it goes back into Trump's favor, 53 to 39. When you look at education, the better educated, the better Biden fares. With a college degree, 49.3% for Joe Biden, 30.9% for Donald Trump. You go to some college, it's 43% for Trump, 28.9% for Biden. And high school or less, Trump laps the field. High school or less, Trump laps the field. 56.6% to 32.2%. What this data is saying, and read into this all you'd like, I don't mind you doing so at my behest, is that Joe Biden has ground to make up with the only high school educated, the GED or didn't finish high school demographic. The more educated a voter was in this poll, the more they lean towards the Democratic Party nominee. And conversely, the less educated the person who was polled is, the better Donald Trump fared. I don't think that's an accident. Let's see. We'll look at it by income. Okay, let's do this. And by the way, the independent vote, oh my God, this is the independent vote. When you just look at the top line for independent, just independent voters, the lead vote getter is RFK Jr., 33.8%. Y'all willing to throw away a Republic on a guy? And I haven't even gone in on RFK Jr. yet. There will be a show where I just dedicate myself to that. 33.8% for RFK Jr. and Biden and Trump tied amongst independents, 21.6% for each. When you look at income, if you make less than $25,000 in this poll, you voted slightly more for Joe Biden, 40.7% to 34.6% for Trump. If you make somewhere between $25,000 and $50,000, you still slightly favored Joe Biden over Donald Trump. If you make between $50,000 and $75,000, it was 43.4% for Donald Trump, 34.6% for Joe Biden. Somewhere between $75,000 and $99,000, that gulf widens for Donald Trump, 47.9% to 40.8%. If you make between $100,000 and $150,000, 42.2% for Donald Trump, 34.4% for Joe Biden. If, however, you make more than $150,000 a year, it's a statistical tie. So the more successful, it just closed that gap. Half a percentage point being the difference there. The next page in this survey goes essentially right track, wrong track. The question, all in all, do you think things in the nation are generally headed in the right direction, or do you think things are on the wrong track? So yeah, right track, wrong track. The top line is 67.9% wrong track, 23.8% right direction. I don't know that I necessarily think that that's attributable to any candidate. I think that's just a general sense of where the country is going directionally, and obviously because that's the question. Thank you, Ron. No, but what I mean by that is that can be indicative of those who are hand-wringing over a second Donald Trump presidency and thinking, my God, we're heading in the wrong direction if that's the case, So that again, I don't really attribute that to any one candidate or the Biden presidency, meaning that 67.9% of pollsters think that we're headed in the wrong track. I don't even know where to go with that. What do I want to look at? I want to look at the 1829 vote. It's definitely that way amongst the under 30 voter, 85.7% saying down the wrong track. And I think that we had cited a poll, was it a month or so ago, where a lot of under 40 voters were like, blow it all up, start all over, scrap the Constitution. Yeah, I mean, I think that's somewhat indicative. Approve, disapprove of the way Joe Biden is handling his job as president. It's sort of a mixed bag. 47.9% strongly disapprove. 4.8% don't know, so that's 52.7%, and the rest were either somewhat approve, disapprove, or strongly approve. If you add up his strongly approve and somewhat approve, it's 38.8% versus 47.9% strongly disapprove, mild disapproval, or don't know. Not a strong number. Let me skim through here and see if there's anything else I want to pull from this poll that's of any significance. Question 12. As you may have heard, last month Donald Trump was found guilty in his trial related to falsifying business records regarding hush money payments. Do you approve or disapprove of the verdict, or have you not heard enough to say? Approve of the verdict. 43.1% strongly approve. 6.3% somewhat approve. That is 49.4% somewhat or strongly approve. The disapproval is only 25.3%. The somewhat disapproval and the strongly disapproval, only 30.1%. That is a big swing in the approval, disapproval. So it appears that a vast majority of Georgia voters who were polled approve of the verdict, despite all the noise folks on the right have made about that verdict being an abdication of justice or weaponizing the justice system, blah, blah, blah. Question 13, does the verdict make you more likely to vote for Donald Trump, less likely to vote for Donald Trump, or not make a difference at all? More likely to vote, 16.7%. Less likely, 25.4%. No difference, 55.6%. But I mean, again, that doesn't mean necessarily that 55.6% of those who are already going to vote for Trump, that just means that 55.6%, whether they were already not going to vote for or already were going to vote for Donald Trump, the verdict didn't change their mind at all. Okay, so I don't want to react about that. Amongst conservatives, 58.7%, no difference at all. Republicans, 60.7%, no difference at all. Amongst Democrats, obviously 49.9%, no difference at all. Amongst independents, 56.8%, no difference at all. We'll obviously put those poll numbers, in fact, I'll just give you the PDF in the show notes today at ronshowatl.com. Okay, so that's the AJC and University of Georgia's polling. Today, Nate Cohen writing in the New York Times. There's a release of the New York Times 2024 polling averages. New numbers there showing that Biden's actually closing the gap with Donald Trump. Trump leading Biden 41 to 40%, obviously margin of error there. Kennedy at 8% and the remaining electorate undecided in both the two-way and three-way race. According to their email this morning from the Times, Trump's leads in the states likely to decide the outcome. While he often leads by only a point or two, he does nonetheless hold the edge in Pennsylvania, Wisconsin, Michigan, Nevada, Arizona, and Georgia, states that would be enough for Trump to win the Electoral College and therefore the presidency, Nate writes. Of course, the election will not be held today, and the polls will not exactly be right. Well, thank you, Nate. Let's see. In the battleground states, you've got a 1-point margin between Trump and Biden in Wisconsin, Michigan, 2 points in Pennsylvania. You've got a 5-point margin in Nevada, a 5-point margin in Arizona. I think you got a Senate race there that's probably going to drag Biden across the finish line there, if I had to guess. Here in Georgia, we don't have that, where it's a 7-point margin. And Kennedy getting 8% there. In North Carolina, A state that, like, I've read a lot about, the Biden-Harris folks, Democratic Party. They're actually very bullish on that state, despite the fact that they see a 7-point gap, 44-37, in North Carolina. It'll be interesting to see how that state plays out. That's one of those states that for the last 15, 20 years, you look at the demographics and you say, this should be a purple state, this should be a blue state. And gerrymandering has enabled the Republican Party to maintain a lot more control of a state that is, by all accounts, a toss-up state. It's not unlike what Florida used to be back. Remember in 2000, we were counting hanging chads for crying out loud because it was that close. And what has happened in the last 24 years. I think in a lot of cases you see where gerrymandering gives a sense of inevitabilism to one party. So they'll continue winning over states despite raw numbers not really showing that much of a difference between the red and the blue count. And because they keep seeing the results like that, you start to see some Democratic voters, liberal voters, just saying, well, why vote? It doesn't seem to matter. And it sort of bolsters conservative votes. And it starts turning some minds in their favor because it's kind of one of those things in America. We like pulling for the winning team, right? It'll just be interesting to see how North Carolina breaks this election cycle. Florida too, because there's some hints of optimism within the Democratic Party there in Florida as well. I don't know where they're getting it, but Ron DeSantis, less popular person than he was 6 months ago, a year ago, 2 years ago even. It'll be interesting to see how those states swing and where maybe Democrats see an opportunity to flip a state. I don't know. We've been saying this for 10 years now. Texas has got to be right there, right? Ted Cruz is on the ballot, and he is not a popular candidate, and yet Ted Cruz keeps winning. Although, let me see if I can't find a poll on that race real quick for you. I found it here. Texas Tribune. Well, this is not encouraging. Come on. Well, you know what? Actually, this kind of shows that Ted Cruz isn't very popular, and Colin Allred's just not very well known. 45% for Ted Cruz, 34% for Colin Allred, and 6% of the voters asked would prefer someone else. 14% said they hadn't really thought about it yet. Well, there you have it. Come on, Texas. Get it together. You know what? I can't sit here and laugh at Texas. I'm sitting here looking at Georgia's poll numbers today as well. So there's that. All right. One more segment. We'll wrap it up in just a few here on The Ron Show. Thank you for listening, whether it's on the America One Radio app, 9 to 10 a.m., 5 to 6 p.m. weekdays, or on demand at progressivevoices.com or via podcast. You can follow us on your preferred social media platform. That would be at Ron Show ATL, Twitter, X, Instagram, Threads, Facebook. Not on TikTok. I'm actually waiting on the TikTok ban thing to be decided before I decide I'm going to go all in on TikTok. I get the relevancy of TikTok, and I get how easy it is to sort of make some quick, subtle points and really move the needle a little bit. It's just that I have a personal TikTok, and I don't use it very often. I would then also, TikTok also is very hard to log out of accounts and into another. So I would need to have one for my residential real estate, and I do use my TikTok sometimes for real estate, but it's not enough. And then I'd have a show TikTok. It's just too complicated right now. I've decided I'm waiting until we decide if we're going to keep or not keep TikTok in the U.S. Before I decide to commit to that. Tomorrow on the show, as I mentioned before, Libertarian presidential nominee, the candidate for president from Atlanta, Georgia. His name is Chase Oliver. Did you know this? His name is Chase Oliver. He is just a few years older than the minimum age requirements to run for president, and yet there he is. So we'll talk with him. That should be an interesting conversation. I'll be retaping that here in a matter of minutes, actually, right here in my own condo. He's apparently a cat person, so my two cats are fine. I didn't have to go rent studio space for that, and I appreciate the grace on that. Lorraine Cochran Johnson, the new DeKalb County CEO-elect, once she gets sworn in next January, she will be on the show Thursday. So it'll be nice to kind of have those two guests on the show, giving a little clout to the Ron Show. We appreciate them doing that. Let's see. So you heard the poll numbers and you're a little concerned. You're like, oh my God, what can I do? What can I do to change this trajectory? Well, what if I told you, by the way, that there are all kinds of jobs that are available? I somehow wound up on this list from gainpower.org, GAIN power.org. And I imagine if you go to their website, you can wind up on this email list. I don't know how I wound up on this email list, but I'm on it. So I get emails all the time telling me about jobs that are available. A remote position with Revolution Field Strategies to be a canvas manager. They need a shipping associate here in Atlanta. I believe that is someone that just literally mails out pamphlets and flyers and stuff for canvassers to hit the streets with to various parts of the country by just going to a FedEx Kinko, a UPS store. Is FedEx Kinko still a thing? A UPS store or something along those lines. They need a state operations director in Alabama, North Carolina, Pennsylvania, Georgia, D.C., New York, Wisconsin, and Ohio. That is a job. And let me see what this stuff pays pretty good. I mean, it's obviously not a full-time job. It is a full-time job, but it's a temporary job, I guess is what I'm saying. And they pay pretty well. They also need project directors in Michigan, Pennsylvania, Georgia, Wisconsin, North Carolina, New York, D.C., and California. The DNC is constantly hiring. I get something from them quite often. Revolution Field Strategies regional organizing directors in Georgia, Pennsylvania, North Carolina, Wisconsin, Michigan, D.C., New York, and Massachusetts. Oddly enough, in Mableton, Georgia, they need a canvas manager to work a coordinated campaign in Mableton, Georgia. Peachtree Corners, Georgia, a canvas manager there. All of these jobs are available all the time in my inbox, apparently, from the organization Jobs That Are Left. And again, I don't know how I got on this email list, but I would imagine if you go to GAIN, GAIN Power, gainpower.org, you too can get these jobs in your inbox. So if you're wondering, what can I do where I am to help out, to move the needle, Jobs That Are Left, if you have any skills that might work in their favor, it can be everything from, like I said, just being a shipping organizer to someone who can be gregarious and engaging and want to go door to door and canvassing, in 95 to 100 degree heat. God bless you. I've done it. I think my time has passed on doing that. But if you are of age and are of, enough relative physical health or can ride around with a water cooler or a cooler full of water, I should say. You shouldn't run around with a water cooler in your car. But a cooler of cold water in your car, even that can be a job, just, going around and making sure that the canvassers have cold water. That, by the way, is not yet illegal in the state of Georgia, despite what you may have heard, and I'm sure they'll work on that in the next General Assembly session. But, canvassers, you can give them water. Jobs That Are Left at GAINPower, GAIN power.org. There you go. Something sort of noteworthy, and I don't have a whole lot of time to devote to this, but I thought this was pretty noteworthy. The Georgia Recorder reporting, Jill Nolan giving us this story. Prominent former elected officials in Georgia from both sides of the aisle are banding together to launch a new group focused on restoring trust in democracy and defending the state election system. The Democracy Defense Project, which was announced Tuesday, will consist of some former heavy hitters in Georgia politics, former Republican Governor Nathan Deal, former Democratic Governor Roy Barnes, former Republican U.S. Senator Saxby Chambliss, the senator, and former Atlanta Mayor Shirley Franklin, a Democrat. The new group, part of a national effort focused on battleground states like Georgia. Press release announcing the launch of the group described the effort as a, quote, counterweight to attempts to undermine and sow distrust in election integrity. Gee, I wonder who created that. They plan to do that through public statements, pushing back on election disinformation, and defending those who have sworn to uphold the rule of law. How about this quote? For far too long, politicians, pundits, and activists have worked overtime to sow distrust in America's electoral process. That is former Governor Nathan Deal, who left office in 2019. Him giving that in a statement. We refuse to sit on the sidelines while the bedrock of this great nation is eroded away by misinformation and dangerous political agendas. Our goal is to restore confidence in the electoral process that makes the country exceptional, he continues. Wow. All right, that's going to do it for today's Ron Show. That article and the polling from the AJC, the New York Times, in today's show notes at ronshowatl.com, the NBC News piece, and the Texas study as well. Chase Oliver tomorrow on the show. We'll see you. Have a great one.